who's on the show today. Hey guys, this really works. Mel Beach, she's going to show us a slice of improv and a modern mola. And Alex is going to show us a quilt she is really excited about. Stay tuned, everybody. Up next on The Quilt Show. Can you believe this? And now, your hosts for The Quilt Show, Alex Anderson and Ricky Timms.
Welcome to The Quilt Show. We're back in our original stomping grounds.
We are. We're coming to you from La Vida, Colorado, which is where I live, and boy, are we having a great time in the mountains.
I was so excited when we decided to tape here because I got to come back. I love this place.
Well, it is. It's great to be here, and I'm excited about the project you're going to share with us today because it is just so much fun.
I know. Now, so here's the deal. Ricky and I love old quilts, antique quilts, because sometimes they're quirky and they're not so structured.
Right, and we get on the websites and look around at old quilts, and we were on Julie Silber's website one day.
Her Facebook.
Oh, Facebook. Yes, it was on Facebook, and suddenly we both at the same time, I think we were on the phone, right? And we both saw this quilt and went, oh my God, this is great. I got to make this quilt. No, you can't make the quilt. I'm going to make the quilt.
No, I grab it first. So
Alex got the dibs on it.
So
let's show the picture.
Yeah, let's take a look at it. It's a string quilt with a variation of an old maid's ramble. And I just love the free-formness of, is that a word, free-formness?
Yeah, free-formness.
Yeah, of this quilt. It's so much fun.
I love it.
So I decided to work in Cave Facet fabrics, and I'll tell you about actually what I thought about when I did it towards the end. But basically, this quilt is just made of two different blocks. You have a string block, super simple, and then the old maid's ramble.
Right, and I want to point out that while this one on the table is relatively diagonal.
Yes.
We can look at the original, and they're not always on the diagonal.
No, they just cut quirky.
Yeah, they're all very quirkily. There's another word we're going to throw out today.
Okay, so let's talk about how to make this one first. Actually, when I first tried to make it, I tried to do it like foundation paper piecing, and I thought it was way too restrictive.
And probably more tedious than what you did.
Yeah. So what I did was I ended up cutting up a bunch of strips, and I would recommend that you do 3 inches. You can always make them smaller, and the 3 inches will make more sense when we get down to the more structured block, okay?
But you could be 2 inch, 3 inch, 3.5 inch, 2.5
Yes.
inch. It doesn't really matter, but you do have a little trick coming up.
Yeah, so start with 3 and then maybe peel it down if you want. And then what you do is you just randomly sew them together. But wait, not so randomly, in as much as you've got to be able to get an 8.5 inch block off of this thing. 8 inch finished, all right?
Okay.
So I was in the middle of nowhere land when I was making this, so I took 2 pieces of freezer paper, your favorite thing on the face of the earth.
Absolutely.
Ironed them together and then cut this at 8.5 inches.
All right.
Okay. Then as I sewed things together, I mean, nope, there's just a little corner sewn on here. I could take this and put it on here and then mark the corners and then take my ruler that I had and then just cut it out.
Right, and let me borrow this from
Sure.
you, because if this one was sewn together as well, then you could, you've got a lot of options for where you want to turn it.
Exactly.
Right?
And you do want to turn it differently. I mean, some are just right on, perfectly straight, yeah. So, but then this, I had this ruler at home, how I wish I'd brought it. This is an 8.5 inch
How
ruler.
you wish you brought it to your sew days.
Yes, because I could just put this on here, make sure that, whoops, see, that's not good because there's a little bit hanging off there. I want to get this on here exactly right. Let me try this way. No.
Right there, that would work. Yeah, that would work.
And then you just go and cut it out. Again, this is an 8.5 inch block, raw.
Okay, let's talk about the sizes. That's what you're doing and that's what you're teaching for this. But we had a little chat before this started that we're using the Old Maid's Ramble block today, but if you had sampler blocks or scrap blocks or UFO blocks and they were all 10 inches or 11 inches or 12 inches, you could just make these all 10 or 12 or 11.
Exactly. But the one thing you really do want to do, even though this is like free form, do go and stay stitch around the edge, because what I just cut here, you've got biases up the galore. And a stay stitch is just a regular stitch on your machine, less than a 1/4 inch.
Yeah,
so
like
it's
an 1/8 inch.
Yeah,
like
and then it won't stretch so much.
Sure.
Okay, so I made a ton of those. So much fun. Now let's get down to this block. This, it's in a 4-patch right here, right? This here can be very tricky if you do it the straightforward way. But Dee Christopher did something in our classroom on the site, and I took it one step more.
Okay.
And this is a really great trick. Hang with me on the cutting numbers, and it's kind of counterintuitive.
Get your pen and paper out.
Exactly. So let's start with, we have to have half square triangles, all right? And I've got half square triangles here, here. Let me see, how many are in this
There's
thing?
6.
6, okay. So
Well, 6 of the small ones.
Yes, so you'll make 6 half square triangles. You're going to cut a square at 2 7/8. That's why I had you cut the original strips in 3, so you could go pull from that pile.
Right,
okay?
right.
2 7/8. Then you draw a line corner to corner, and then you stitch a 1/4 inch on each side.
And I'm just reminding everybody, those are face to face,
Right.
the 2 fabrics.
And then when you open it up, here's what you have. You've got these.
Right.
Yay.
And you have to cut it on the line in the middle.
2 7/8.
Okay.
So now down here, I'm going to work on, let me bring this over here. I'm going to work on this right in here, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to cut 2, this is 2 1/2 now that it's been
Now
sewn.
that it's sewn together, okay.
So you're going to cut this rectangle at 2 1/2 by 3 1/2.
Adding an inch.
Adding an inch, all right? 2 1/2 raw, so this is 2 1/2 by 3 1/2. 2 rectangles, and they're going to be sewn together like this.
And I would pay attention in this case, the white is really making the design, so you want to make sure that the points of those are going towards each other.
You only have to do it wrong 3 times to get the point, okay? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it together like this, okay? Now I'm going to get out my scissors, my super sharp scissors, and you've got this space between here. I want this side to be pressed in this direction. I want this side to be pressed in this direction.
The opposite way.
So I'm just going to pick up my scissors and just do a little snip.
And don't snip past
Don't go past the
thread.
thread. Don't do that. So then what you're going to do is then, of course, press this way and press this way.
Perfect.
Now what you're going to do is take this measurement, which is 5 1/2 by 4 1/2, and you're going to cut another piece of fabric that's 5 1/2 by 4 1/2. Then let's come over here.
Yep.
You're going to take your ruler, and you're going to find where your 45 degree is on your ruler.
Okay.
Mine is right here. I'm going to run that 45 on the top or the bottom of the block, and I'm going to get it, let me turn this so the camera can get it right in here. I want to draw a line, whoops, let me get that on there, Ricky.
It's all right.
Draw a line and then stitch it.
Yeah, now I want to talk about that. I want to stay here for a second because this I think is probably
This is the part.
Yeah, this is it. So you've got your 45 degree on the edge. You've got the 45 degree coming here, which of course makes a 90 degree, but this angle here is the critical one, and the edge of the ruler should be on the point, not a 1/4 inch away.
Exactly on the
right
point.
on
Yes.
the point.
Yes, and then you stitch on both sides.
So you do that, well, you have to flip it around to do that.
Yes, you do.
You have to mark both sides.
Yes, you do. And then what you do, now Dee Christopher on the site said carefully put this on the 1/4 inch line here and then go ahead and cut it. I think you can just go smack down the middle and you'll be just fine.
And your seam allowance, if you go smack down the middle, is a little
bit
bigger than
more.
a 1/4 inch, but it's not affecting anything.
Right.
So you could choose to 1/4 inch it, or you can just cut it down
So
the
here
middle.
comes the magic, you guys. Look at that.
So
right
there's
there.
the unit.
Right there. I mean, how fantastic is that? So let's take a look at the block here. So you have this here. you have this here, and then for this little 4-patch here, you're going to have to cut 2.5, 2.5, and then you've got these guys ready to go.
And you do the same thing over there, and ultimately it goes together like a 4-patch.
Love it, love it. But I will tell you, I had to do this a couple times because I was so ready to, well, look at what I did. Oh, I took it over there. I did one wrong, and you only have to do it once wrong
to figure it out. I want to take a look at the original quilt again before we look at yours, okay?
Yeah, and then I want to talk about the fabric.
So we'll call to this. We'll have Rick put up a picture of this, but I love just the randomness of it, the random of the strips of the strings, I should say.
Yes.
And as I said, even though this particular person used the old maid's ramble, which we now call Bubby's Ramble.
Yeah, the quilt's called Bubby's Ramble.
And now let's look at yours and talk about what your thought process were.
Okay, so on the original quilt, navy blue and red seemed to be the thing that held it together. I wanted to work with my collection of Cave facet fabrics, and I kind of wanted to go more towards the hot colors.
Yeah. Fiery colors.
Yeah, now there are some blues in here.
Oh, there's blues and there's greens, but there's more of those oranges, reds, and yellows.
And so I made 2 rules for myself. I brought some solids that were in the fiery hot colors right in here. That helped give you a place for your eye to rest. And I also love all of the polka dots. So I grabbed all the polka dots. The polka dots gave me light. So I had both dark and light in this. And then last but not least, the other rule I made for myself was that in all of the structured blocks, I made sure that there was a value difference here, and there were also polka dots. And honestly, as I made it, I just put it up on the wall, and it went together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah. And there's a lot of texture going on here. So even in your structured blocks of the Old Maid's Ramble, they're kind of hidden in there because of all the texture.
And then one other thing I want to say, when it came to bind it, I felt it still needed to be held together a little bit more. So I put in an orange flange before I did the hot pink binding. And I have to tell you, my daughter loved this, and I think this will go to William, my 4th grandchild. It's a great baby quilt.
It is, and I would say that if you're thinking about doing a baby quilt, one of the things that I know youngsters like especially is using those novelty prints, you know, with the dancing hippopotamus or giraffes or soccer balls or things like that, because they gravitate to those kind of images.
Great idea, great idea.
Super. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, this was really fun. I love these challenges that we're giving each other these days. So much fun.
Well, one thing's for sure, we're not at the beach today. We are in the mountains, but we are going to be with the beach. We're going to be with Mel Beach right here on the Quilt Show doing some fun stuff, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, everyone.
Alex, this segment is not going to be challenging, but we're going to be talking about challenges.
Challenges are so much fun.
We're going to be talking with Mel Beach. Mel, welcome to the Quilt Show.
Thank you both.
And we understand that challenges are your thing.
They are. I'm a glutton for punishment.
And why do you love them so much?
They push me to try new fabrics, new techniques, new designs, and really get me outside of my comfort zone.
I think that's probably true. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Well, we've done some challenges on the show, and I understand from talking to you that you've done 50
to 60 challenges over the past 3 to 4 years.
That's craziness.
Yes.
So
how do you even find the time to do that much?
Well, some of them are anywhere from 4 to 6 months long, and some of them are actually 1 week challenges. You get your assignment on Sunday, and you have 1 week to finish a quilt in 1 week.
Okay,
where do you find these challenges? Where do they come from?
Great question. They are available online. A lot of fabric companies are hosting fabric challenges to support their fabrics. Magazines are doing them, so they're all over. And once you kind of get a reputation for doing quilt challenges, they kind of find you.
Why don't we take a look at some of your quilts?
Because these are all
challenges,
right?
Yes.
Right.
So the first one here, tell us about that.
It's Spitting Stars. It's actually a monthly challenge where every month, sponsored by Modern Quilt Unlimited, it was Everything is New Again challenge. And each month they would pick a traditional quilt block. and we participants had to kind of give it a modern remake to it. And so that was 1 month, 12-inch blocks.
Okay, now I heard you say spitting, Charlie.
Spinning.
Spinning.
Spinning
That
stars.
couldn't be what it is. Spinning stars.
I don't know, I could go with
All right.
either.
That's great.
And at the end of the 12 months, we had 2 more months to put it all together into a finished quilt.
So the challenge wasn't so much to make the blocks because you were going, everybody was making the blocks, but it would be how you put it together.
Both. We had votes for each block, and so my sailboat quilt actually got first place for that particular month.
Oh.
It was open to a viewer's choice where you could have your friends, family, and the open public vote for them.
Nice.
So
That's
a lot
great.
of fun.
The next quilt is the one that kind of speaks to my heart.
It was a special one. It's kind of one of my first quilt challenges on the national level. It was by American Made Brand. It was when they first launched their solids. They were completely grown here, manufactured and sold here in the United States. And so it was the Farm to Fabric Challenge. And so they were trying to kick off this new fabric line. And so we had to use their fabrics, all their solids, and create any kind of quilt that we wanted to. And so I really did a lot of research about the cotton production and how, how fabric is ultimately made. And so I incorporated, you can see the tractors kind of mowing out picking all the cotton from the field. You can see the actual tractors with their little teeth that would pick up the cotton, and then ultimately woven and spun into fabric that makes,
Did
fabrics
you
and
win?
jeans. It was one of the finalists. It was one of, I think, 12 or 13 finalists, and it traveled all over the country, which was
that's
really
great.
exciting.
That is exciting.
Thank you.
Well, now the next quilt, I feel like we've gone to medieval England or
Right.
something.
Very. That was the Hoffman Challenge, and I found that a pretty challenging fabric. It wasn't a fabric that resonated with me initially, and I would have it hanging in my studio, and I would look at it every night. What am I going to do with this fabric? Because it wasn't my aesthetic. And I was stuck in traffic in the Bay Area, San Jose, and I thought of my friend who actually does sword fighting and jousting in the area. And I was like, how fun would it be to make a shield quilt? And I did all kinds of research on heraldry designs and medieval times, and created my own original shield using the different elements from that fabric.
Well, see, what is so wonderful about this is when we walked into the studio today, it's like the same person made all of these quilts,
Right.
and that's wonderful.
And they're all triggered, they're all prompted by the challenges.
Yeah.
I would never have made any of these quilts in my imagination had it not been for the prompt of either the fabric or the theme of the challenge.
And you're working with fabrics you might not have worked with.
Absolutely.
You're pursuing ideas you may have never created in your own without some kind of a prompt.
Correct.
And I have to believe you've learned a lot.
A ton. I mean, each new challenge, there's a great quote by Nelson Mandela, and I don't always, I never win or lose. I either win or I learn something. And each of these challenges, even though they don't go on to be a big showstopper, I've learned so much from each and every journey.
That's great. Let's look at this next one, the Ziggy Zaggy orange and black and white.
Thunderstruck. It was the most recent challenge by Riley Blake. They team up with the Modern Quilt Guild every spring, and they actually, if you're a Modern Quilt member, you can sign up and get free fabric, which is pretty awesome.
Nice.
And the challenge is to use those fabrics into an original design, any size, any theme. And so I was really inspired by bands, classic rock bands from the 80s and 90s, such as AC/DC, and that was where I got the lightning bolts. And that's why I named it Thunderstruck. So, yeah.
Cool. And the next one, which we're talking about, is the green and black stars.
Okay, that's not applique, Ricky. That's pieced.
Did I say applique?
No, but I thought it was applique until I got my nose on it.
Wow, okay.
That's my Limelight Starbright. It's for the Michael Miller challenge with, again, Modern Quilt Guild. So that's their fall challenge that they do. And again, we received free fabric. So I got the blue from the Luxe collection. So it was a solid and a kind of a diamond print. And I, again, looked at these and wasn't sure. And I love doing mandala designs. And so I've been trying to think. I've done them hand-dyed. I've done them appliqued. I wondered if I could do a pieced modern design, and that's kind of what came out of it.
Well, one of my favorite design aspects is for balance is radial symmetry,
I love it.
where it explodes from the middle and just comes out, and I think you did a great job on that.
Thank you.
And then who's up next?
Ooh.
That's also Hoffman Challenge. That's the first time I participated in the Hoffman Challenge, and it was a fun print with all these kind of Dresdens floating around it. And I was looking at it, studying it, and I started to see owl eyes in some of the motifs. And once I saw the owl eyes, I started seeing owl feathers, owl beaks, owl talons, and the whole thing just kind of created. And of course, I had to make a pair of them. They had to have a romantic date under the moonlit sky. So I had a lot of fun with that, and also traveled all over the country. One of the first stops was actually in Sarasota, Florida, which is where my mom lives. And so she went to the Guild, and they treated her like the rock star, and she got to hold it up and show it off as if she was me. So it was a lot of fun.
That's great.
So in front of us is your very first challenge, and I adore it because it's different, and with the satins and all that kind of stuff. Let me hold it up so everybody can see it. Tell us about this.
This was a Guild challenge. This was my first challenge ever through my local Guild. It was a very big challenge for me. None of them were traditional cotton, quilting cottons. It was...
Oh, they gave you the silk fabric?
We had to use, there was upholstery fabrics in there, there's some velvet, so nothing was really traditional quilter's cotton.
You're brave to do this, let me tell
Very
you.
brave. And there was 23 different fabrics, and you had to use all but 1 or 2. And you could only add 2 of your own fabrics. So it really forced you to work with some pretty challenging fabrics I would never have done before. And again, I just started with 1 butterfly and played with other ones. And this was what kicked off my whole start with quilt challenges.
What did you learn when you made this one?
A whole lot. A whole lot. How to work with difficult fabrics and how to wrangle them and get them to behave almost as quilting cotton as close to as you can get. So Stacy Shedflex was my friend in terms of stabilizing some of the more silky, slinky fabrics.
Now, you don't do very many traditional patterns or patterns that are just printed. You really use your challenges to create your own.
I started traditional, and I would start to follow patterns. I don't know if I ever finished a pattern start to finish as it was written. I always kind of took little deviations or used my own fabrics, but these have really helped me push the envelope in terms of original designs.
And you started quilting, is it 02?
2003.
Wow. And look how much you've learned from challenges.
And that shows my progression, really. You can see from here to some of the ones that are up on the wall.
That's great. When we come back, we're going to meet with Mel, and I think you two are going to go to bat, and we're going to do the slice of improv. We're going to just make it happen, right?
I can't wait.
Okay, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited about this segment because what Mel is going to be sharing is something I'm just starting to discover: improvisational patchwork.
It's a lot of fun. It's very freeing, forgiving, and so much fun, so absolutely.
And it basically started with this quilt behind me, right?
This is one of the earlier startups that I did, and so it just, I keep asking the question, what if? And I just start with the basic technique and then ask what if and see what happens.
And so when you get a challenge, I hear that you toss out the first idea. Tell me about that.
Correct. And so, maybe if the first challenge is, stars, I may not do initially all patchwork stars. Maybe I go to astronauts to NASA, or I try to make that A to B to C connection. So it's not necessarily the original what other people may think. It's something outside of the box.
Nice, nice.
Unexpected.
Good. Okay, so let's get busy here because you guys are going to love this.
So what I usually do is I choose an oversized block, and I'm just starting with 6.5 inches. 6.5 inches, but it could be really any size, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
So, like, if it's going to be 6-inch finish, don't do 6.5, maybe do 7 or something like that. Okay,
that helps with the forgiving process.
Okay, cool.
I love solids. I love batiks, small prints. They work really well for background squares. And then I start with a ruler, and it's just my comfort zone. If you are totally free and just want to go and cut whatever you like, that's awesome. And so I just start with an acrylic ruler, and I just move it around any angle I like. I try to avoid the edges because that may get trimmed up later on. And so that's my and so I just choose whatever angle. This one looks pretty good.
Uh-huh.
And I just slice.
I bet you that at some point you will not be doing a ruler. I am predicting this.
I see it in my future for sure.
Right. So then what do we do?
I just carefully separate it away so I can identify where the gap's going to be that I have to fill with some of my scraps.
Because what might happen if you don't just carefully separate?
Great question. Especially with solids or batiks, because they have 2 good sides. I could easily do this,
not good.
and this will not go back to a full-size square necessarily. Right. And it's very easy to do, and ask me, I've done it more than once. So this helps me kind of stay organized. And then I go to my scraps, and I call them my schnibbles. And anything that's 1 inch wide or bigger, and it's a lot of my leftovers from my quilt backs, from my bindings, it all goes into my Chinese food containers.
Oh, right. So here you have like this, right?
Yeah, correct. And so when I'm trying to audition stuff to fill in scraps, I'm looking for at least 1 inch above and below it. And that's going to help with the forgiving process as well. I'm not going to have any gaps later on.
Okay.
So I'll put that there. And so here, what I'm going to do then, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
What I'm going to do is put my space in here. I still have 1 inch above and below. I flip it over, and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch top to bottom. I generally use a shorter stitch length because I may cut it up later.
Oh.
And I usually use a piecing thread, like an Aurifil 50 weight, something that's going to normally blend in. I'll be using black thread for the rest of the demonstration. That's just so we can see.
Okay.
But usually I would use a blending thread. So.
All right.
So here we've gone. I've already done my 1/4 inch seam.
How picky are you with the 1/4 inch?
So forgiving. It really is. So if it's a little off, if you don't have a perfect 1/4 inch seam for this basic technique, it's not going to matter.
We're liking it more by the minute.
Very forgiving. So, and then all I do is I generally press it away. So I have the extra seam allowance underneath. That's going to create for me extra pop, extra loft.
Oh,
it's going to help them pop. So if you wouldn't mind help pressing,
I would
that'd be
love to
wonderful.
press that, okay? I like that idea that it gives you a little extra something in its belly.
Yeah, and it's a personal preference for me. You know, there's no really wrong way of pressing for this.
Okay.
Now, something I was talking about in terms of angles, we do want to, you know, in terms of what happens if you don't use a long enough piece of scrap. This one looks like it's long enough, but when I go to finger press it open, you're going to see a gap down here.
Ooh, that's not good.
And so that can be a potential problem. And again, for this, I wouldn't worry so much.
But you've oversized the initial cut, so you're probably going to be okay.
But that problem becomes magnified if I use a wider strip. Look how much bigger of a gap that is. So that may be a little bit more tricky to have that forgiving process.
Okay, so
later on.
always leave 1 inch or so at the
It
top
helps.
and bottom.
Again, as you get more comfortable with this, it won't matter so much. Once we do that, we're going to have these 2 pieces. I trim off my excess fabric, and all I do is I turn it over and I trim it flush with the original block size.
Okay.
Okay. And then I have this leftover piece. I flip it over. And when I first start off, and for new quilters, I will mark the 1/4 inch seam. The way I do that is with just a friction pen.
Okay.
And I will just mark a 1/4 inch along the edge.
Why?
For me, I want to care about the hills and valleys. So when I start and stop, I want it to be a 1/4 inch where that valley is. And that really helps everything to line up beautifully.
Okay, so in other words, here you've got it marked, so you'd want to have that end up right where this edge is here.
Perfect.
Okay, gotcha.
And that helps. Again, once you start doing this more and more, I can eyeball it, but for folks that are starting off, it's going to be much easier. Again, I sewed my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I get to press it over again. And again, I'm going to try to press it so my seams are all underneath.
I got to tell you, I don't do that, and after today, I'm going to do that.
It's just a personal aesthetic preference.
I thought, oh, just steer clear underneath there, but I like the idea that it just gives a little bump to the whole thing.
And then once you beautifully quilt it beyond and do a dense quilt fill, it's going to even pop
Love
more.
that.
Now, in terms of those angles, you know, when we're first starting off, you know, those hills and valleys may be subtle. So this particular angle is a little bit more vertical, more straight, so I'm going to have a very small, very shallow hill and valley.
Here, let's take a look at this, though. Just love it, okay?
This is a more extreme angle. It's almost from corner to corner from the original block, and you can see it's a much more extreme angle there. So just something to be aware of.
Take a look at this, though. And the beauty of it is, in the end, you trim them to a certain size, and they just go together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich,
really
right?
Do.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is a different, instead of all going angles this way, I flipped it over. And so many, I mean, sky's the limit with it. So correct, once I have the finished size, then I can trim it up. And usually I recommend doing 1 block at a time. And once you have them all done, whatever your smallest block is, that's the magic number.
Perfect.
And I can still audition, I can still trim it. So even if I'm trimming down to maybe 5.5 inches, I can do some more wonky angles because I have some forgiveness there. So
nice.
A lot of options.
Okay, but now we're talking.
So this is in terms of the sampler. We start with the basic insert. Well,
And we'll take a look at this in a minute, okay? Look
what
at
if
this,
we
you
add
guys.
another? Yeah. So you can just keep adding inserts over and over until you are happy. That's not all. What if instead of using a solid piece of fabric like I did here, we all have leftover schnibbles and strata sets from our quilts.
And all of this comes from this original challenge that you
so
see.
many different things. So here's, if I use a strata set, if I slice my insert from that, you get so much interest and you can incorporate so many different fabrics. And then if I use some of the background square fabric for my, my strata set, you get the illusion of
You like float them.
floating pieces. And so that's how I got to my confetti quilt. It was all based on confetti and little bits of pieces of fabric. You can do multiple inserts, and so not necessarily crossing over, but they can be next to each other.
Is this probably the most favorite class that you teach?
It's a lot of fun for people because I always start off by asking, how do you feel when you hear the word improvisational piecing? And I see a lot of fear and panic and worries.
Yeah.
And again, I tell them we're going to have fun, we're going to be forgiving, it's going to be very freeing. And really, after they start doing the basic technique, you see those shoulders come down and they're exploring
Because it's really,
so much.
it's structured. I mean, in the improvisational way, it's still, there's a roadmap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can even do curves,
Look at
gentle
that.
curves, which is so fun. You know, using a bias strip, and so you can do gentle curves, nothing too crazy, but what a lot of fun to
And
add
that's
even
bias?
more. That's cut on a bias.
Okay.
And then from there, the sky's the limit. You can even start doing words and messages, which is, again, you know, if you have a baby quilt and you want to put the baby boy or girl's name there in the border, you can start putting their names in it. So it's a lot of fun.
So let's take a look at this particular quilt. I adore it because it's basically a sample. So walk us through, okay?
So in the workshop that we do, we start with a basic, just one basic insert. And then I ask the question, what if? It's my favorite mantra for all my quilt challenges. What if I do something different? There are no quilt police with me. So 2 inserts, 3, 4. In the orange row, what if we start doing intersections and crossovers? And so we start exploring that. In the yellow row, what if we look at the different ways we insert?
Those are the inserts, right? Yeah.
So pieced inserts, floating inserts, and combinations.
So we can get this up to us, okay?
So up to this point, I've been working mostly with 1-inch inserts. Now we can explore skinnier inserts, wider and wider, and mixing them up. So again, you don't have to be limited to just 1 inch. You have a lot more options. You can even do wedges where they're not perfectly parallel, and do wedges to give even more interest. And here's my curves. Again, so many different curves and intersections possible. In the purple row, when you work with all 90-degree angles, you can start to shuffle the deck and move them around because they're basic modules. And so it gives you even more option. That's what I did in the bottom row of my Fields of Quilted Dreams. That's all 90-degree angles that you can kind of keep piecing together. You don't have to finish with a perfectly square. So I usually trim them up to a square. That's what I did with my slice of pie. You can trim them into a triangle and piece it, or a hexagon, and you can even applique it into a circle or reverse applique to a heart. So again, the sky's the limit with this particular technique.
It's the whole what if.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then we have, let's see, I'll hold these up.
So these are all just small little X's. This is for the modern quilts or quilting challenge. Was their 10th anniversary, so we had to incorporate the 10 somehow into it. So Roman numeral for 10 is X's, and I put 10 of them, and it's all improvisationally pieced.
And the thing is, you probably went to 10, how I and you write it, and then you go, nope, think harder, huh?
Here's
Look
that
at this with
confetti
the inserts.
So this was a
Can I hold
1 week
it this way?
challenge. Absolutely.
Okay.
1 week challenge, the theme was confetti. And here's where I started in the yellow ones. They're kind of boring, they're big inserts. And again, I asked what if? And I started doing smaller schnibbles, piecing them together. And again, this was a 1 block at a time. What does this quilt need? And if I'd cut all of my blocks over at the beginning, I think it would have been a very lackluster quilt.
I'm randomly pulling here.
Please.
Let's see which one. Yes,
or.
this one.
So this is just a preview of some of the words you can do. You can see how much fun I'm having with Slice of Improv, the different words and messages, and you can see how much I love improv.
Love it.
So again, the sky's the limit with this particular technique. Ask what if, have fun, raid your scraps. It's a super fun, friendly technique.
And then by the end of the workshop, everyone's just like have wings, right?
Oh my gosh, they're like, what if I do this? Go for it. And I love seeing them
What if?
accept the improvisational flow of it and just go.
Love it. Love it so much. But we're not going to let you go anywhere, okay? Staying right here. Because next, Mel's going to teach us a modern mola. More with Mel. Stick around.
Welcome back to the Quilt Show, everyone. We're enjoying our day today with Mel Beach. And Mel, you're going to show us a technique now that's actually kind of a throwback to something that quilters may be familiar with. Tell us about this.
Sure, I'm calling it, dubbing it Mod Molas, and it's based on crayon-etched artwork from my childhood.
Let's take a look at this. This is, first of all, you're singing my song because I love color, right?
I do
and
too.
Black really enhances that. But you're saying a throwback to childhood and Crayolas.
This was one of those one-week quilt challenges where the theme was through a child's eye. And so whereas other quilt artists chose to celebrate their children's or their grandchildren's artwork and reinterpret it as a quilt, I did a throwback to my own childhood where my mom showed me how to layer swatches of crayons, just regular wax crayons, and then you cover it completely with black crayon.
With black, I remember doing this, or I also remember doing something with color and black tempera paint where you would scratch off the top.
And then you can just magically cut away parts of the black layer. I got to press a little bit harder.
Let's go to the, onto the wood there.
To reveal parts of the other layers.
Now when you're scratching this, I mean, you're doing an outline. Are you then going to go back in and scratch away more?
Totally, yeah. You can do anything, sky's the limit. And if you don't want to go through all this crayon scratching, kids have it so easy nowadays. They come with it already packaged where it's already layered for you. And you don't have to do all this prep work. You could just go to jump in and start scratching and creating your own original artwork.
I did not know this was available, so that's a time saver.
Pretty exciting stuff. So
very good. All right, and you're taking it to fabric, right?
I am.
So let's talk about this guy and its bright color fabrics. I mean, obviously there's going to be some fabric selection choices that are important.
Yep. This one I had this amazing rainbow swirly fabric in my stash, which just happens to be here.
Oh my gosh,
and
that's
so
beautiful, isn't
kind
it?
of simulates the crayon scratchings all over, but you don't have to be limited to that. A lot of the commercial batiks that are out there have this wonderful mottled effect and a lot of movement of colors and shapes and patterns that gives some of the unexpected fun of this particular challenge. This is my own hand-dyed fabric, so you can use your own hand-dyed and use that, especially if you have maybe not so exciting fabrics. So again, anything that's got a lot of changes of colors.
Now I jumped over here because of the wax resist, the print.
Absolutely. So these are more gradients or ombres, and so they have that natural flow and change of colors. It's a little more predictable because there's rows and definite lines, but again, it's doing all the work for you.
Look at that guy right there.
And this is one of my favorite ombres right here.
Because it changes so slowly.
Beautiful gradient.
Well, I think that first of all, we could look at these
all day
because they're gorgeous. But let's take it now to the steps that you're going to do to create these. This is a very popular class when you're teaching,
I
right?
did it for my quilt show, and it was just people kept coming back, do another one, do another one. So it's a very rewarding and fun.
All right.
So we're going to start with a basic quilt sandwich. Your quilt back, your batting. Here's one of those wonderful fabrics that's going to be changing, and I cover it completely with a solid black.
So wait, so I have to go all the way back. You're making a quilt sandwich yet, but you've not made any quilt design.
No quilt design.
Now that's really different because I mean, in a mola you would be creating your fabrics and start doing the cutting. Is that right?
Correct.
But here you're going straight to the quilt sandwich.
Quilt sandwich, and that gives you the element of surprise.
All right, so one more time, there's the backing, the batting. You're using like a cotton batting, I see.
Yep.
And then your color and a black on top.
You've got it.
All right.
And then, you know, you can choose any quilting design. So this looks pretty familiar to you.
I think that's a great design.
With permission. I blew it up and chose this wonderful motif. And I don't trust most of the marking pens that are out there. I hear too many horror stories, so I choose to use contact paper, regular contact paper.
Now this is the shelving contact paper.
Yep. And I trace my design on the back, and I can peel it away. And I can place it right onto my quilt sandwich.
You don't have to have zigzag. You can use floral,
anything
whatever contact paper, as long as you can see it, right?
And so what I can do is I can just, you know, peel away certain elements.
So did you cut the contact paper? Did you trace it onto contact paper with, or draw it with a Sharpie marker?
Sharpie. I just traced it using my front window box.
And then how did you then cut it out?
With scissors.
So, all right, so you cut the whole thing out and laid it back down and put these back in place?
And this way, yep. And I can kind of cut out in my basic shapes, cut those out. And
I want to go ahead and pull just a couple more off to see that, there's the star getting revealed. So this is your marking technique, is what you're saying.
That's my marking technique. So it's my way of cheating without necessarily marking and risking having marks be permanent.
That's a great idea. All right, so now it's time to quilt.
It is.
All right.
And I usually, you know, I use, again, my Aurifils, and I chose a wonderful, again, another ombre or variegated for my top. It gives it that fiery look. When you're choosing your designs, you want to have some spaces that are a little bit more open. You don't want to be cutting out little tiny bits, so about an inch or bigger. And so that's why I'm going to be you know, leaving these unquilted.
On this example, you have gone ahead and stitched where you want quilting to be.
Correct.
And you've left open areas where you're going to reveal color. Yep. What about out here in the outside? Would you normally have quilted that?
Quilting
You're
those
going to do that as well?
And one thing I try to do is when I'm doing my quilting, especially outlining the spaces I'm going to be cutting away later, either a shorter stitch length or reinforce with like 2 lines of stitching. It's going to reinforce that.
And is that what you've done here, 2 lines of stitching?
I've done that. I try to do. I did a shorter stitch length, and then I did echo it.
And this is free motion?
This is all free motion.
I guess you could use feed dogs with the walking foot if you wanted to.
So here it is. All you are asking about the background quilted, leaving these unquilted areas. And now,
I think the biggest surprise for me in talking about this is that you didn't do all this work before it's quilted. That's really, I think, a big woohoo.
It's a big leap of faith. When I first did this, I was like, what if? And I didn't know if it was going to work. I had never tried this before. And I carefully cut away, and
there you
you'll
go.
See.
What if is a big thing for you.
It's a big thing.
It's a big thing for me, too, because I think when you go down the path of what would happen if, I'm always saying try it and see. What do you have to lose? Because you might be writing the next quilt book.
Yeah, sky's the limit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we carefully cut away the top layers.
Is that what you're going to do here or there?
Do here. Right here.
Okay, all right.
So usually I start with a seam ripper, nice sharp seam ripper.
All right.
And I try to make my initial small cut close to one of my edges, and I try to do a straightaway if I can. And you kind of, this is a bit of a learning curve, and you're going to kind of start to feel resist.
But you don't want to go through both.
You try not to, although, you know, I'm not going to
What
lie, it's
would
happened.
happen if you do? Not a good idea. Yeah. Try to stay on one layer, right?
And so once I get that, do a little sneak peek.
So I could see that there was just a little bit of color showing.
No batting sneaking through. If a little batting goes through, just jump to a different area, and it's going to be disguised. These are Havel Thread Easy Snips. They got curved tips, and that's going to make it really easy for me to do the rest of the cut work. It's going to hug really close to my stitch line, and all I do, and this is the exciting part for me. I love free motion quilting. I'm not going to lie, but this is just the icing on the cake.
I'm back to, sorry I'm being a broken record, but when I first saw these, I had no idea that this was happening at this stage. Yeah. I would have thought you'd made your quilt top and then quilted it, but what a great idea.
And there's no way of, especially choosing the fabrics, there's no real prediction, so it's a surprise even to me.
Isn't that fabulous? And because you've been able to cut so close to the edge, it really is very refined. Yeah. It's really very refined.
Very much so.
Nice job.
So you do a few more of those. And here's the finished logo. So again,
there's our
so
little
much
guy.
fun.
The TQS star, everyone. I always like him because he's got a little perky head going, look
it's
at
such
me,
a fun.
I just kind of tossed my head off to the side there. What a great, great technique.
Thank you.
Now you've got other examples
to
of
show
this.
all the what-if possibilities for this technique.
All right, so let's look at this guy. I love this print because I was thinking we didn't see so many prints, but there's still a lot of color with some print
This
here.
is actually the reverse side. I used it for the reverse side. It seemed to match, and I was like,
Alex,
I should
look at
not
this.
have
I
used
cannot
that.
believe this. I cannot believe I had to get my nose in, sorry.
Please. So all triangular designs, again, leaving certain elements, so some flying geese, doing both the background and the actual flying geese themselves. So much fun.
Well, and I don't want to discount or overlook the quilting being in a contrasting
Beautiful,
color,
beautiful.
because that's creating another
Absolutely.
a complementary design.
I mean, this is really sophisticated. I mean, super sophisticated.
These are some of my hand-dyed fabrics. Again, I never knew. So some purple splotches, some blue
yeah,
splotches,
and here you really didn't
reveal.
cut out very much at all.
No.
Yeah. And here's this one fabric that
All
you
circles.
really love.
This is
Look
one of
at
my
that.
favorite ombres. Just beautiful. You can kind of see how I layered it. And just doing all circular designs. So this is still in progress. I'm still cutting away little bits and pieces as I go.
That's beautiful.
And then you don't have to stick with one solid piece of fabric in the background. You can start to piece your backgrounds. And so for
this
this
is
one,
this way.
it's okay. You know, I have this amazing batik up here, a commercial black and white print, and another wonderful print, batik at the bottom. Do my whole cloth quilt with little flowers and a butterfly and some flower pots. And then again, that leap of faith, cutting away little elements of your petals or your parts of your flower pot to create a really beautiful one.
So I've just got to ask, is this class more popular than the thing we did in the last segment? How does a guild decide which to have you do?
This is a new class, actually,
Yeah,
that I'm just,
both.
this is a brand new one that I'm going to be revealing, but I did it at my quilt show, and people just kept coming over.
Oh, it's fantastic.
All your favorites, CAFE prints, all in the background. And you were saying it doesn't have to be free motion. These are all done with a walking foot. So for those folks that are a little intimidated by free motion, this is from my other class, Walking Foot Wow. So these are all designed stitched by a walking foot. And then again, you can cut away certain elements for that reveal.
That's awesome.
What is your website?
MelBeachQuilts.com.
And people can get hold of you that way to travel and all that. And you're up for travel?
I love to travel, so this has been
Nice.
fun. I get to finally join my quilts as they travel the world.
You know, we heard that you were in higher education back in the day, and then I heard a little thing of like, and you also were an animal rescue.
I did.
All kinds of animals specifically?
Dogs, cats, and rabbits predominantly, and that's where I got my two studio assistants, Suzy Q and Panda. They were rescued. They were ones that I worked with, and they came home with me, so they helped me as I work in my studio.
Color, improvisation, accepting challenges, and loving the animals. You're a gal after my own heart.
Yeah, but just hold on, because there's more that you will learn about Mel
in
the after set.
That's true. Everyone, thank you for joining us on the Quilt Show today. Mel, thank you so much for all you shared. And Alex, thank you for the Bubby Ramble. That's it, the Bubby Ramble quilt up at the top of the show. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And remember, it's a new day every day.
Don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss the after set.
Mel, challenges have been fun for you, and I understand that also you love humor. And you were telling us a little story about your partner and some humor, so let's go there.
Doug's a pretty humorous guy. He thinks he's a funny guy in the family, and so he always threatens me if I ever break up with him, he's going to join a quilting guild because of all the ladies. He loves being surrounded by all the ladies, and I said, go ahead, help yourself. So I'm quite fond of him. He helps out with our quilt show and everything else. So.
Well, the big surprise that we learned about you is that not only do you love the challenges of quilting, but you challenged yourself to get into not only improv quilting, quilting, but improv comedy?
I did.
Which is, I mean, I'm thinking about Whose Line It Is and where they just throw something at you and you've got to be funny?
Exactly.
Oh
We
my
get
gosh, so it's
suggestions
not
on
like a
the
planned
spot.
comedy act.
No, nothing's planned, nothing's scripted. It's all driven by suggestions from our audience.
Well, we have a clip.
Yeah,
Let's take
yeah,
a
so
look.
let's set it up for us.
So this was my first time doing a public performance for as part of our end of our class, and so the suggestion I think was something about dates or something, and my partner who got up on stage usually breaks up with me on stage. That's kind of the running theme for our classes. And he's like, Mel, come up here. I said, okay. So we get up there and it's a first date. And it's a very awkward first date because we're in the bathroom, in a public bathroom. He's sitting on a toilet, which is just a chair. And I had no idea that was what he was planning. And I just jumped right into it and accept his reality.
All right, so let's take a look at that.
Oh God, oh God.
You okay?
This toilet won't flush.
Oh, okay. What did you do?
I'm sorry. I know we're on a date, but you know.
First date, but hey, what a great icebreaker.
Yeah. Sorry. You know, I know I'm a plumber, but right now I can't get up.
No, you stayed there.
Yet? Come on!
Oh,
It's alive!
just give us a few minutes. Okay, we're on a first date. People are so understanding.
Seriously.
That is great.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, seriously. But now I have a question. I mean, are you still doing this? Is it something you're still involved with?
I am. Every Sunday evening I go with my classmates and that's our Sunday evening fun, and so we're now in advanced conservatory and it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to de-stress and just explore new ideas.
And friendships as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I understand that you see a parallel between the comedy and quilting, other than you have to die laughing when your quilt is
Yeah, really.
So many ways. Part of the big mantra is yes and so when I take a quilt challenge, I say yes, and how can I put my own voice onto it, my own original spin on a particular challenge. It's also being very present in the moment, and so what does this fabric tell me to do? What does this particular design tell me? What's next? And so being very much in the moment, being present and accepting that as a reality. This is the fabric I've inherited. I've got to make it work. So.
I love how things all connect. I mean, my music connects to my art. You know, your challenges connect to improv. Yeah. There's so many connections that happen in what we do, and I love seeing that. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Wonderful show.
Thank you.